chance to look.
I'm on the coffee again.
You're
Hello.
coffee.
That's us. Yeah, here we go again.
Good evening, guys. Welcome along to another Blether. Pleasure to be back on the screens. You might have heard Russell just mention coffee as we went online. Unfortunately, unfortunately, we're having a detox anyway.
It's self-inflicted. It's a self-inflicted detox, which is going reasonably well. That's 2 weeks now, so but I'm looking forward to breaking it already. I think that's
you've done pretty well, is it? Yeah, you've done
2 weeks.
Well.
I mean, 2 weeks on Saturday. Yeah.
I had my first dram last night since Friday, so that's pretty good. That's almost a week. It's 5 days. Take away the weekend, that's a week. But I might actually pour another dram of this.
Oh, the Brew Laddie. That's a belter. That's an absolute belter.
Douro wine. It's.
I think I was far too kind taking that down to the academy guys when Robin was here, because it got emptied that night. Yeah. That's what it's for. It's for sharing.
It's a beautiful, beautiful dram, and I had Robin in the car, playing in the car, and the memory of the whiskey came, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pour a dram. I just had the one last night. It was just nice to sit down and.
Yeah, it was a good night. David's on, so David, I'm pleased I shared it with yourself, boys. Good evening, David. Good evening, Phil. Hi, Phil. How are you doing?
Good to see you guys on. It's one, David, that you've sampled before. The nice wee Brook Laddie from Robin Lang, and then you had obviously the follow-up as well. The second release. Right. So these were whiskies that Robin selected from Brook Laddie Distillery alongside Jim McEwen as part of his stock, and in partnership with a chap called Thomas Ewers, who owns the dram room in
Paderborn, yeah,
Germany. So I think it started off as most great ideas do, just as a drunken chat over a couple of whiskies. Wouldn't it be great if we did a collaboration CD? There we go. And then lockdown happened, because Robin wasn't gigging, he wasn't getting out or anywhere. Thomas called him up and says, "You know what? This is an ideal opportunity for that conversation we had, however many years ago." So that's exactly what they done. They launched a CD and released a whiskey to go with it, and now 2 whiskies. So it's going to be I don't know if it's going to be a continued series, but certainly one.
Sounds like it might be. I think Thomas seems to get a hold of some pretty good drams. So
yeah.
It's evening, Callum. Good to see you tonight, Callum, and Ross. Good evening, Ross. Ross was sharing. I noticed on social media he was introducing some Americans to the Glencairn Portwood the other night. So,
awesome.
Yeah. So looks like that was an enjoyable evening, Ross.
We need to spread the Glencairn love far and wide.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
As long as they don't start increasing their prices and becoming too commercial, we like it just the way it is. So Ian, if you're watching, Robert, if you're watching, just keep it
as it is. Keep it as it is. Yeah.
Keep it as
it's not broke, so don't fix it.
So we have a wonderful guest with us tonight to join us. A little bit, I don't want to say off topic, but normally we chat to people who are professionals in the industry. Tonight we've got more of more than an enthusiast.
More than an enthusiast, of course. Yeah.
A passion, a project passion. I'm not sure how. We'll let him describe himself.
Yeah.
He's the only person I know. The only other person I know that wears a hat just as much as I do. And when I met him in Glasgow, I was down for the Whiskey Ambassador Advance course. It was the first time I saw his hair. And unlike me, who wears it to hide the bald spot, this guy's got a full head of hair. So for different reasons, we wear a hat. But let's welcome Gary on, and hopefully he can join us from the back garden. Good evening, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
How we doing, gents?
Very well. Very well. Great to see you.
Yeah, glad to be on. I've followed a few of your Blethers over the last few months, so I was chuffed to get the invite.
we had to wait until a week that you weren't hosting, so it's
Well,
nice.
indeed.
Well, aye, this is it. Yeah, there's usually the Thursday nights. We always tend to have the crossover, but yeah, there was a bit of a slight delay on one of our tastings, so we've got that one next Thursday instead, actually. So we've got Kenny and Victoria from Dram
More again, yeah.
yeah, so it's like I say, it's a bit of a delayed one. We were actually due to do it a couple of months ago, but due to Kenny and Victoria being jet setting all around the world to various places, Israel, and then I think they were over in was it somewhere? They were over in one of the Caribbean islands, I think, as well, doing things with rum. So yeah, so we finally managed to pin them down to next week. So yeah, really looking forward to that one. As their drams never disappoint, you know.
They're in Hamburg tonight. Their new release looks absolutely incredible.
Yes, yeah, I was chuffed to see a Glen Glassic in there as well. I'm looking forward to having a wee taste of that at some point.
I haven't tasted it yet, but the nose on it is absolutely incredible. So yeah, you're going to enjoy that.
I mean, as far as single cask Glen Glassics, you know, I've not had many bad ones, if I'm honest. So yeah, should be interesting. But yeah, like I say, so the drams that we've actually got next week are some of the previous outturn. But yeah, there's still some cracking stuff in there. Yeah. There's a Blair Athol, there's a Williamson. What else have we got? There's a Deanston in there as well, I think. So yeah, some interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. He seems to be more experimenting finishing as well now, isn't he?
Yeah,
I think every we thought maybe bar the Inch Fad was a wine or a sherry finish.
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of bourbon casks in this tasting, so I think the Blair Athol is just a straight up first fill bourbon, and what was the other one? Was it a Glen Awake or a Craig Awake in a bourbon cask? I think possibly as well. There's at least two. Oh yeah, and there's the Williamsons in a refill bourbon as well.
Yeah. I think the only I've ever had was I think Morris Mackay did a refill sherry, but not that long ago. Williamson, which was back when it wasn't before it was Morrison Distillers.
Yeah, as I've actually just due to the sort of time of the year as well, as I've kind of not been drinking so much peaty stuff recently. I've been leaning more towards the sort of spring, summertime drams you guys mentioned just before the intro there as well, was about Glencadam, you know, is obviously a perfect spring, summertime dram. But I thought I'd start tonight with, I'm going old school, as you know. As,
Lovely.
I like my old blends, you know, so yeah, I thought I'd start the night with something nice and easy going, you know.
Fantastic. So we're just talking before we got you on, just we're going to get you to describe yourself, and I'll maybe mention just quickly as well how I first met you. So I've not had the pleasure of actually meeting you in person yet, just online. But Callum Renton, one of the stalwarts of the group, who needs professionals when you've got a legend like Gary Drams Dunsire?
That's not what you said earlier.
That's exactly not what you said earlier, indeed. But that's what the club for me is about. And for me, I remember the first one I ever joined in was at Glencadam.
Yeah,
must have been at the start of lockdown, and very, very quickly thought, gosh, I don't know any of these guys, and they're all at another end of the country, and even further south, there's people from London on this thing as well. Very, very quickly became very, very good friends. And that's to me what the club's been about.
It's certainly. I mean, obviously the whole lockdown thing was the big sort of game changer, if you like, as far as the tastings. So we'd been doing tastings in Glasgow, in East End of Glasgow, and we basically every month we would do a Sunday afternoon, and we would basically try and showcase sort of some of the bars around East End of Glasgow. Because basically all the whisky tastings, certainly to my knowledge, as far as in Glasgow, were all either in the town centre or they were in the West End. You know, there wasn't really anything in the East End at all. So, yeah, we kind of started off. We had about a year of doing in-person tastings. And then we kind of I'd started doing a few in Perth as well, because I've got A couple of friends have a pub in Perth. So we were just kind of starting to kick things off in there. And also a pub in Dundee as well was a friend of mine, Jonathan, who owns the Speedwell Tavern in Dundee. So we actually, we'd done one tasting in the Speedwell in Dundee, and it was absolutely cracking. You know, we had the room was full. We had like a full blown folk session came in straight after us as well. So yeah, it was just one of those cracking nights. We had sort of some great folk down as well. So we had what's his name, Brendan and Andy, the guys that own Nabravine. The indie bottlers, they came down. We had Mark Thompson from Glenfiddich, he was down as well. So there was some interesting characters down as well. And then we were just away to do the second one in the Speedwell, and that was when lockdown hit, and I basically had to refund everybody their ticket money back because everything was shutting down, sort of like literally day by day. And so, yeah, that was kind of knocked it on the head. And then it did take sort of maybe a couple of months before I decided, right, let's try and do this online and see if it works. And to be honest, I thought I was kind of late to the party as far as the online tastings, but it turned out I was pretty quick off the mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so from there, we obviously started getting interest, and I started speaking to some distilleries and a couple of companies and just seeing if anybody would be interested in doing the online tastings and joining us. And then it just gave me sort of something as well where I could, select some whiskies that I thought would be good for a tasting, in between the ones where we couldn't get hold of somebody from the distilleries. And it just kind of took off from there. And like you say, Russell, we ended up with people from the length and breadth of the UK joining in. And everybody's been pretty good, obviously, just the way things fall is that you're never going to get everybody on every tasting every month. But, most of the people that do join us, they come in and out. And that's I suppose, the other bonus with our tastings as well, is the fact that you're not sort of tied into any membership or anything like that. You can come and go as you please. You can, if there's one tasting that you fancy, then you can just join in, and then you never have to come back if you really hate us. But yeah, I mean, like you say, you kind of touched on it as well. As the other part of it was the fact of that a lot of the tastings, and certainly even some of the tastings that I'd been on, online tastings, because it was a lot of the time with brand reps and things, then it could kind of get a bit sort of one-dimensional, if you like, as it's all about the distillery, and they're obviously quite rightly promoting their own brand, which is absolutely fine. But sometimes with that, people are scared to turn around and say they don't like it, and then that in itself becomes a problem because, certainly I think even with online tastings or any tasting for that matter, there is always that sort of worry of the sort of subliminal messaging that you can put across to people. So, and it can be quite daunting for people that have no experience in whiskey, or they're just starting out in whiskey. And, I mean, for instance, you take sort of likes of Serge from Whiskey Fun, does the reviews. And it's like 4 bloody paragraphs of tasting notes, and it's just like, it just gets really daunting, as if you're sort of just getting into whiskey and you're going, well, I don't get any of these things, is there something wrong with my palate, or am I just, maybe I'm not meant to drink whiskey, or... So yeah, it was just about kind of bringing it back to basics and going, well, do you know what? At the end of the day, do you like it or do you not like it? It's.
You've certainly noticed that with the online virtual tastings, that people maybe aren't comfortable coming into a room of people, and especially if they're new to whiskey, or they may just like to sit and have a dram. They're not into investigating, into kind of nosing it and doing all that. They like, and virtual is ideal for them because they sit in the background, they mute themselves, they stay quiet, they enjoy, they listen, and they're very happy to do that. We've got so many locals who do that, and I always thought virtual was going to go, that's going to be for people who can't come to the shop because they live in Glasgow, they live in Manchester or Norway or whatever, but it's guys who are maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes out from us.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think that's it. I think
as well, you know, you're going from a 30 quid night to maybe a 50, 60 quid night. So.
Yeah, and you know, I noticed the same thing myself. You know, is that you do kind of get quite a lot of people where, you know, they'll tune in and, like you say, they're quite happy listening, but they're just, like you say, maybe not too comfortable with sort of putting in their input just yet. You know, they're still trying to sort of build their confidence a wee bit. But then you do find that maybe after a second or a third tasting that they've joined in and they've got a bit of a rapport, you know, and you know, they know a few of the faces on the tastings, then they're a bit more inclined, especially after maybe 2 or 3 drams as well, they're a bit more inclined to sort of open up a little bit, which again is kind of part of it, you know, is the fact that,
isn't it? That's a problem.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, no, it's been really good. It's been really good. It's worked out well, and we're now back in the pubs again as well. So we're now back to once a month on the Sundays, doing the tastings and exposure.
So was it a conscious choice moving from the Sunday to Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, the Sunday side of things, the reason for the Sundays was basically because obviously it was still in Glasgow. My reasoning was that I thought at least on a Sunday afternoon, if you wanted to come down and have a few drinks, but you had to drive on the Monday, you know, you still had enough time to recover and be okay for the Monday morning, you know, whereas on a Thursday night, you know, if there's people sort of that have to work the next day, then it can be a bit more tricky. But doing the online on a Thursday night was more just trying to fit it in when other people didn't have things on. And, you know, I thought, well, a Monday or a Tuesday is a bit of a write-off. Nobody wants to drink sort of 5 or 6 whiskies on a Monday night, or, well, some of us do. But yeah, I mean, realistically, I thought, you know, how many people are really going to get on a Monday or a Tuesday night? So they were kind of out of the window. A Wednesday night, I kind of looked at, but I think there was other people doing things on a Wednesday night. And then, obviously, you know, asking people to do a tasting on a Friday night or a Saturday night, again, is a bit of an ask if people have got things planned for the weekends.
Yeah.
So that was it. It just kind of fell naturally into, well, a Thursday night seemed like a good night. You're almost at the weekend, so you can kind of allow yourself a few drinks, you know, but it's, you know, it's still sort of just fell into line that way. And it worked for me as well, obviously, you know, and obviously worked for you guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think logistically, it gave you a chance to actually get the samples out to people as well, you know, in time.
Yeah.
Time for the tasting. So
yeah, this is it. Yeah, it just seemed like the sort of the most plausible sort of day of the week to do them on. But I mean, I have to say, I do like the Sunday afternoons. You know, it's.
Oh, it sounds awesome. I mean, you were so far away, and I keep on thinking I need to book a weekend and the Monday as well, obviously. And come along, yeah.
But no, they're a great laugh, and again, I mean, it's early doors again. I mean, I do kind of feel like with the in-person tastings that it's kind of back to square one again, because it's been sort of 2 years plus since we were doing the online tastings. The in-person tastings. So yeah, it's kind of starting back.
How much of the kind of the old guard, I suppose you could call them, are back now? Because there's guys we see every week. Matthew's on watching Bev, who's obviously up our neck of the woods, Matthew Dunsire from Caird Head.
Yes, aye.
And so how many people are kind of come back that were there originally and have kind of followed you all the way through?
So we've had 2 or 3. So so one of the boys, Colin, does both. He does the in-person and the online tastings. So he's come back, and there was another couple of guys on the first one. In fact, 3 guys on the first one as well that were from the original sort of in-person tastings. But then I suppose the other part of it as well is that we've got the bonus of that now we've got an extra added audience that are around the Glasgow area that, you know, because they know the online tastings, they might come down on the Sunday as well. So, I mean, like I say, it's still very early doors. We've only done 2 tastings. The second one just being last Sunday. But yeah, it's again, I think it's more about the group of people and getting folk together, you know, and having a natter. So we've got sort of in the pub that we're using as well, they've got like a little snug, and it's just basically like one big table with benches all around it.
Okay.
So yeah, it's perfect. You know, it's great little setup. And then obviously if we do get more people joining, then we'll move to the other side of the pub, and we've got more tables and chairs that run all the way down one side. So yeah, we'll see how things go over the next few months. I mean, I think it's that way as well. It probably wasn't the smartest idea in the world to start the Sunday sessions again right slap bang in the middle of summer when everybody's away. But yeah, it's one of those.
Sometimes though, don't you? That's the thing. We've heard quite mixed reviews of all these events kind of starting up. Space Egg Festival, Phage Isle, and kind of Whiskey Festival, or even kind of the local markets and all that opening up. And people are like, oh, was it as busy as it used to be, and whatever. It's like, you have to start somewhere. If you keep putting it off, waiting for the perfect time, it's never going to come. So
well, this is it. You know, is and again, you know, at the end of the day, is I've got plenty of whiskey kicking around in the house. So, you know, if it's smaller groups to begin with, then that's fine. You know, I've got loads of bottles that are kind of bits in them, and we just will take them down. And then obviously, once we get more people and it builds up again, then, you know, it just means that I'm buying sort of twice as many bottles between the online tastings and the in-person tastings. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those. It kind of balances itself out, to be honest. As you know, between the some of the distilleries and things putting in bottles for us, and then me buying maybe a few bottles as well, and then other times I'll have to buy all the bottles if it's myself that's doing the tastings. So it kind of balances itself out over the year. But yeah, I mean, that's us pretty much, I think, as far as the online ones, that's us pretty much now booked up till the end of the year. So we've got a couple with sort of companies or distilleries. I've got one with the guys from Casks here in September. And then we've also got Ian McAllister from Glen Scotia. He's going to be coming up. Yes, I'm looking forward to that as well. So, and then obviously December we've got our Springbank, Kilkerran, Long Row end of year bash as well. So yeah, I'm well stocked for that one as well. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. I just need to, and again, now that I've kind of got that out of the way, it means I can just concentrate a little bit more on the in-person tastings as well. You know, as now that most of the bottles and things are sorted for the rest of the year. So yeah, I'm actually getting a bit more organised these days.
Mike's just seen his laptop's died on him, so he's obviously a way to plug in somewhere. But so yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the start about, you know, really being keen to bring something to the East End of Glasgow because there wasn't anything happening there. But you know, before you decided to actually do that, what was it that made you think I'd quite like to share a bit about whiskey and I want to do tastings?
I mean, you know, my background's in the bar trade originally, so I was about 17 years in the bar trade. And then with that was working in whiskey bars. So I lived in Edinburgh for about 5 years and worked in one of the whiskey bars in the town centre. And yeah, that was kind of the first. I mean, I'd been drinking whiskey for, you know, a good few years before that and collecting whiskey and everything else. But that was the first time where I got a taste of sort of actually doing tastings for people and you know, sort of entertaining people, if you like, as far as doing tastings. And then, yeah, I never really presented itself, the opportunity, while I was in Edinburgh. And then I moved through to Glasgow. And then I was about I think we were maybe only about 6 months to 9 months in the West End of Glasgow. And like I say, there was plenty of tastings and whiskey bars and everything around there, but there wasn't really anything when we moved to the East End. Mm-hmm. So I decided that was kind of the time to take the plunge, if you like. You know, I already had a bunch of whiskey kicking around, so I thought, well, I'm good for the first couple of months of tastings anyway. You know, and we'll test the water and see how it goes. And then, yeah, it just kind of took off from there, and people seemed to be interested. You know, the venues were interested in hosting us as well. So And then, yeah, like I say, we only really got one full year out it, and then it was it was on to the online tastings after that. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as sort of drinking whiskey and collecting whiskey, I mean, I've probably been collecting whiskey for, God, about 15, 16 years or something like that now as well. So, yeah, built up a fair collection. You know, as you know, I like a dram or two, and even I can't drink them fast enough as much as I'm buying them. So yeah, it's got to go somewhere, I suppose. You know.
Yeah. I mean, it gets very much. You're back. It gets very much like that. You do get to a stage where because there's so many out there. It's.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is this whole sort of fear of missing out craze that we've. It's still kind of there a little bit. I think it's maybe starting to die off a little bit, and it'd be interesting
I
to
hope
hear.
so.
Well, I mean, you posted up a couple of really good bottles that you picked up in auction just this week. I think it was for like 20 odd quid.
Yeah, I mean, they're still out there. You know, you've just got to kind of, and again, I suppose the more that your tastes expand, and the more that you're sort of open to trying different things, you know, is so. You know, why not take a punt on an old blend from the 1980s, or take a punt on something that, you know, you've not necessarily heard much about, or a distillery you've not heard much about.
Yeah.
You know, if you can get it for a decent price, then really you've got nothing to lose. You know, if you're picking it up for 25 quid or 20 quid, you know, is the worst that comes is that you don't really like it, and then you just give it out to your pals the next time they're around. You know, it's
absolutely. So I mean, you know, while we're on that subject, I suppose, and why do you think something like Springbank, for example, has been just crazy for people's popularity? I mean, it's like catnip, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think we've seen it before. You know, we've seen it with Macallan. You know, the first time around, and I mean, I think there is even Daft Mill. You know, in the very early days, there was that mad buzz about people falling over themselves trying to find bottles of Daft Mill, you know. Whereas even I think the Daft Mill thing seems to have settled down now, you know, as people are not chasing it quite as much. But yeah, I mean, I think the initial thing with Springbank is the fact that it's bloody good whiskey. You know, it's really good stuff. The fact that a lot of people probably didn't know about it for quite a long time, you know, and then obviously the more that whiskey becomes, you know, a trading commodity, you know, like art or watches or something else, then I think the more that people that have no interest in whiskey whatsoever start to get their noses in.
Yeah.
You know, and it, you know, it doesn't just happen with whiskey. It happens with everything. You know, it happens with Xboxes. It happens with trainers, watches.
Yeah.
You know, as you've got these people. You know, I think they call them scalpers, and they're basically just there to grab what they can that they know is a limited supply, and that they could sell it the next day for 2-3 times the price. They've no interest in whether it's whiskey, whether it's computers, whatever it is. You know, and that kind of, I think, was where Springbank kind of got that shot in the arm as far as it pushed things crazy. I mean, like I said, the Macallan's always been there, but I think the Macallan's slightly different, where people are buying the brand. You know, with Macallan, it's all about the brand and the prestige side of things, whereas it's not really about the whiskey. I mean, I was speaking to a woman from Edrington the other day, and she was telling me that even the Macallan Gold and the Amber and the Ruby and the Sen, I mean, they're now going for crazy prices, you know, and most of that was,
the gold.
That was just to fill a gap while they didn't have any aged stock left, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's
kudos to the marketing team. It's absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and at the end of the day, you know, they are a business, and from a marketing point of view, it's great. From a whiskey drinker's point of view, it's terrible, you know, because it means that they can just churn anything out and put it in a fancy box, and people are going to pay over the odds for it, you know. But yeah, as far as the sort of
just the danger of something like a Macallan or that kind of ilk is that other distilleries look at that and say, well, people are willing to pay 250 quid for their 18-year-old, so why are we only charging 80 for ours?
Exactly.
And it's almost like a false ceiling that people, these distilleries are. That's a big worry, and we've seen it with things like Glendronach and that are are kind of
Yeah.
the last year. And
well,
it's almost-
look at Tamdhu, for instance. Tamdhu is a perfect example.
Yeah.
You know, it was great whiskey, but they've obviously looked along the road at Macallan and said, well, wait a minute, you know, we're using really good sherry casks, the same as Macallan. You know, we're a good old Speyside distillery. Why are we not charging 250 quid for a non-age statement sherry cask whiskey, you know? And so they have. They seem to be selling it as well, you know, as I mean, again, I don't know who's buying it, as I don't know if it's collectors or whether it's investors or whether it's actually people that are drinking this stuff. I've no idea, but it feels to me like it's probably more likely collectors and investors that are buying these things.
It's a little bit of that, but Tamdhu's still got Tamdhu's kind of well enough known to non-whiskey drinkers, to gift buyers and the likes. I mean, Macallan obviously is known. Your Glenfiddich, your Glenlivets. These are all names that people who come into the shop want to buy a gift for somebody, don't know anything about whiskey, and think, "Oh, I've heard of Tamdhu. That'll be a really good bottle." And you'll say to them, I could save you a few quid and get you an even better bottle of Glenallachie here. No, we'll just take the Tamdhu because that's and you're thinking, well, you know, so that these are the people that are still going to buy it. You know, it's still a good whiskey, but we know there's better and cheaper out there.
Yeah,
and it is you're looking at it as if, you know, it still costs them the same to make that 18-year-old bottle, whether it's Tamdhu or Macallan, whoever. But they only need to sell one to make the same profit as they would have 5 years ago, so, you know, they're probably losing 4 customers. As long as one person's buying it, they're making it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I used to actually really like a Macallan. You know, a Macallan 10 or a Macallan 12. It was a great dram, you know, but it just got too pricey and it got ridiculous, and the quality dropped a bit as well. To be honest, you know, it was so. You know, as you do as a whiskey drinker, then you go look elsewhere for something else. You know, and again, I'm sure it'll happen exactly the same with Springbank, where it'll just get to the point where it's too expensive, or it's too hard to come by, and I'll go and find something else that's a similar or just as good.
They found themselves in a situation that it's not as though they pushed it. They didn't do a marketing brand, or they didn't kind of restructure everything and kind of launch all these limited editions and all that. They just kind of they seem to be the light that all these flies kind of went to when they couldn't get a Macallan, they couldn't get a Daphne. Like, what else is out there? This Springbank local barley looks interesting. Let's try that. And that kind of honed people in the industry and on the distillery, and now even the core range is like, obviously the 2 years of lockdown, restricted production, all that has had a knock on, because they look at it and think, well, and a lot of people don't realize, you know, we have people in the shop are like, why are they stopping releasing the 10 or whatever? Why have they restricted it? Because surely 10-year-old whiskey in the warehouses that, because but they need to make sure they've got 10-year-old for the next, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It's not a case of...
Absolutely. They don't want to fall into the same trap as Macallan did, you know?
So you've got this whole kind of forecasting, erring on the side of caution in that. So they have to, you know, very, very limited in the way they produce it, because everything's obviously done on site. So they've followed it, and they've stuck by the guns, and they said, well, it would have been easy for them to turn around and say, actually, let's do a Springbank non-age statement and churn out, you know, 3, 4, 5-year-old spirit, because people would have bought that, and that would have been an easy. They took out the law. We're probably going to have a wee taster later, now that we're in the mood for a Springbank. But you know, they could have easily done that. But you know, you got to admire them for saying no. We're sticking to what we're doing. Unfortunately, if it sells out, it sells out. That's we're not compromising for quantity.
It's one of those. It's in a sense, I suppose from a whiskey drinker's point of view, yes, it's disappointing that you can't get a hold of the stuff. You know, when you want to, you can't just go down to the shop and buy a Springbank 15 anymore. You know, but you know, from a business point of view, and you know, at the end of the day, they are a business, as all of these distilleries are. Then, you know, it's great news for them, the fact that they've got more people want their stock than what they can possibly produce. You know,
you raise an interesting point there. You raise an interesting point there, Gary. That's very interesting that you can't. There's a lot of these whiskies that you can't just go down and buy when you fancy one, and that's a really interesting thing from a consumer point of view. That we're almost, you know, the product that we absolutely love, sometimes you've got to buy a bottle even though you don't fancy them, because you think, I might fancy that in a few months' time.
Exactly.
It's really going into the supermarket and buying puff rice. You haven't seen it for ages. Oh, I might fancy that in December. I better buy a box of that.
It's a different type of stockpiling, you know. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I've done it myself, you know. Was, for instance, and again, because you know, I do like Springbank and Kilkerran and Longrose, you know. I was lucky enough to get, you know, a couple of bottles of each of the 8-year-old cask strength Kilkerran. So I got a couple of bottles of port and a couple of bottles of sherry. But then bear in mind, obviously, as well, I've got the tastings. So one of each of those will go into a tasting, which leaves pretty much nothing out of those 2 bottles. And then I've got one of each left, basically just to open if and when I want to, you know.
But it's fair enough if you're going to be sharing. It's fair enough. You should get access to these. It's a bit like, I love what Royal Mile have done recently with the giving the allocation out to the pubs. I think that's absolutely
I think that was a great shout.
Fantastic.
And it's, I mean, that's the downside with doing the tastings, is after I've done a tasting and I'm like, oh God, that was a really good dram, and then I'm like, yeah, I've got to go and buy a bloody another one, but then I've also got to go and buy another 5-6 bottles for the next tasting as well. If I was to buy a second bottle of every one that I'd put in a tasting that I really enjoyed, you know, it would spiral out of control, you know.
So Fraser's saying that he reckons it was the 2021 sherry that was catalyst. Yeah, really turned the
Yes, I think that was probably the first bottle that went absolute nuts on auction, and it was going for like 900 quid or something like that. You know, it's just crazy. You know,
the liquid itself weren't great. You know, people were like, "Oh, it's not that." People who did open it didn't actually fancy it that much. It's just because it was sherry cask, it was dark, and that's what attracted people to it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you're always going to have those people, you know, that are just, you know, the darker it is, the more that they want it, you know, and again, I mean, that's absolutely fine with me, because then it just means that there's a whole world of bourbon cask stuff out there that they're not buying and drinking that we've got the opportunity to tuck into, you know. In fact, there's another one I'm thinking of doing, is just kind of like a back to basics bourbon cask tasting, you know, and just doing 5 or 6 really good bourbon cask whiskies and just show like the full spectrum of what you can get off a bourbon cask, you know, because I think it does kind of get lost these days with everybody doing sort of different wine finishes and, you know, different sherry finishes and everything else, which is fine. You know, there's a place for all of that, and I like most of them myself. But
you're preaching to the converted, and you know, our point has always been that you really get to see more of the distillery style when it's just American
straight up bourbon.
Straight up bourbon, or even refill bourbon as well could be.
I've had some fantastic refill bourbons where it's been, I mean, literally it's so pale it's almost on the white side, you know, and it's but it's, I think I had a Glenord actually. I think it was a 7 or 8 year old Glenord.
James Eady.
I think it was a Carnmore bottling actually.
Okay, yeah, I had a James Eady Glenord. It was just superb. And it was about that age as well. Yeah.
Perfect sort of springtime, summertime whiskey, you know, is really light, really fresh, that sort of like tropical fruits, juicy fruit, chewing gum sort of thing going on, you know. It was, really, really enjoyed that. And again, it was peanuts, because who goes out and chases a Glenord? Nobody.
And with that colour as well, I'm not sure what I've got. Yeah, you've got something that looks like that.
Yeah.
And what people don't understand a lot of the time is they think it's dark, it's old, and good. Like, actually, you know, but that's a 15-year-old. Yeah. It's going to get more colour than that.
Yeah.
If it's 50 years old.
I mean, I think the bottom line is, whether it's a first fill or a refill, or even a third fill or something like that, you know, as long as it's a really good cask in the beginning. You know, it's because, yes, you can see that it's a first fill bourbon barrel and it's probably, you know, a bit more golden in colour and a bit more dark, and you think, oh, that must be a real cracker, you know. But if the cask was a thin cask, it had been shaved and recharged sort of 2 or 3 times, you know, it's like probably not going to get much out of the cask, you know, or if it's been sort of, you know, it's not been air dried in the beginning, you know, is they've just stuck it in one of these giant ovens, you know, and sort of like sat the life out it to dry it, you know, it's like you've basically all those oils and everything that are going to give the whiskey flavour have all been basically cooked out it in the first place anyway, so it doesn't matter, you know, how long you leave the whiskey in there, you're not really going to get anything as far as flavour off of the cask. You might get a bit of colour off it because they've charred it a bit more or something, but you know, it's so yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah, I mean I should have just called the batch 3 of the Glenalchie 10-year-old there. I should have showed you if we'd planned this conversation, I would have left it in the bottle for the colour of it. It's quite light. There's some sherry influence in it, but not a huge deal. But then you look at later edition, that's a batch 5, and this is kind of the first one that kind of really went out of stock. It on release because it released about 2 weeks after the batch 4 got the
batch 4 won the award.
God, and it used to be we could phone up the distillery at batch 3. Can you send out a couple of cases? No problem at all. We'll send it up the next order. Great.
You got to bear in mind, Mike, the batch 4 was sitting on the shelf. Yeah. The batch 4 we had a dozen bottles. We had a dozen bottles sitting on the shelf, and they must have been there for maybe 3-4 months. And they were going kind of one at a time with people that enjoyed Glenalchie and were enjoying it. And then there was a dozen still left there, and they were starting to take up a bit of space, to be honest, because we had other stuff we wanted to get on the shelf as well. And it was like, we need to shift this stuff, and then boom, won the award, and the whole lot sold out that night. And then the batch 5 sold out, and the batch 6 sold out, and it was just.
I had a guy phone up. He'd ordered batch 5 because it was about 2 weeks after batch 5 came out. I think it was that the award was won, and he'd ordered a case of batch 5. So he phoned up the morning after. He goes, it was actually the batch 4 I was looking for. Can I refund? Can you give me for it? Like, yeah, sure. Do you want to take one bottle? Try it at least. He said, okay, send me one bottle. Fair enough. And then he phoned back about an hour later saying, can I actually get, I want to keep that, can I get like, sorry mate, it's gone. It's like on the shelf, and such was the demand for it of the award-winning batch 4.
See, that's really interesting as well. You know, I have to say, I've never really been one for chasing sort of like award-winning whiskies. You know, it's like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I remember sort of back a good few years ago. Do you remember when it was Old Pulteney won, the 21-year-old won like whiskey of the year or something like that?
He who must not be named whiskey.
Aye. We'll not mention his name, but
that's right.
I mean, it was another one as well where I was like, really? I was like, I always preferred the 17 to the 21. Yeah. And even nowadays with the new sort of age statements and everything else, the 15-year-old's better than the rest of them. You know, it's like so. But because obviously same thing again, because the 21 was World Whiskey of the Year or whatever, and then it sold out in seconds after he that shall not be named had named it. And then basically you couldn't get a hold of it. You know, you couldn't get a hold of it anywhere. And so I thought, well, do you know what? If just a bit of common sense was, well, if the 21-year-old's going to disappear, the chances are the 17's not going to be far behind it. So I managed to put a couple of.
Was kind of the case that there was they knew that it was coming to an end and they were going to stop the 17 as well. You know,
I'm glad I got a couple of bottles of it, to be honest.
I did my usual and picked it up, and you've got to grab these wee cost cutters before the guy who runs the shop actually cottons on to. Because as soon as he cottons on, it was the Ardbeg Kelpie. I was buying Ardbeg Kelpie from him for retail, £99.
Yeah.
And so I was aware there was 3 bottles, so I bought one. I went back a few months later and I bought another one, and I was aware there was one more left, and I thought I quite fancy that again. So phoned up and said, "Have you still got that bottle of Kelpie?" She goes, I've still got it here. I said, 99 quid.
The price up.
I said, 99 quid. He's like, no, 199. I went, what? He says, the boss did say it was a fair rise. Like, I said, a fair rise.
Aye. They're no daft, you know. It's like, and again, you know, that's the thing as well, is because obviously kind of reminds me of like charity shops. You know, when you used to go into a charity shop and you would get a bargain on a nice suit or something like that, you know. But now, because everybody's that globally connected, you know, it's like they've got like young students in there that are basically like researching every single record that comes into the Oxfam, you know, and then they're like, oh no, that's actually like a 4th edition press, so that one's like 36 quid. And I'm like, mate, it's just a record, you know. It's like,
Skis are for 50p.
But I'm to a couple of pounds, mate, you know. So yeah, so I'm going something brand new as well tonight. Yes, the new orchard experiment from Glenfiddich. I really like this stuff, man, I have to say. And again, it's one of those, is probably not the cool thing to say that, you know, I like a Glenfiddich because it's mass produced, but you know, they make a solid whiskey, and this actually I think works really, really well with the Glenfiddich spirit.
Yeah, I like a Glen Grant. I like the 10-year-old Glen Grant you get in the Co-op. You know, I think it's a solid whiskey for the money. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the Glenfiddich.
Well, this one is,
and I say it quite often as well. We've done Dave Smith or whatever. Next time you're in a bar, just have the Glenfiddich. Remind yourself how good a whiskey it is, because there's a reason it's won so many awards. There's a reason it's global. It's a bloody good dram, but because you think, oh, I can get that at any time, or I've got one in the cabinet, or you know, it'll be on off next month at Safeway or Morrison's or whatever. People don't buy it, and they always put it off. And I'm like, next time you then have a drama, remind yourself how good it is, because it's a fantastic whiskey. I really like it.
Yeah, and I've had some cracking sort of, I mean, even sort of some of their projects. I know it didn't go down very well with everybody, but the IPA cask, I thought was quite interesting. I'm not saying it was my favourite whiskey in the world, but I thought it was a nice experiment, and I think it worked pretty well. What was the other one? The Fire and Cane was quite nice as well. It was like the sort of like bourbon cask, and I kind of like as well that, I mean, it would be easy enough for such a big company like Glenfiddich or Glenlivet or any of those to just keep churning out a 12, a 15 and an 18, and then, you know, all your 21-year-old plus stuff, you know, they're going to make enough money off of that anyway. But so I kind of take my hat off to them that they're still kind of doing some weird and wonderful stuff, you know. And again, I've never had, I think that's the first time I've ever had like a Pomona cask whiskey as well, you know. It's like,
that's not part of the experimental series, though, is it?
Yeah, this one is, I think. Yeah, it is. So this is number 5. So I actually bought this on Amazon for 36 quid. I got two £20 gift vouchers from my work. It's the only decent thing I've ever got given from my work, was basically a bottle of whiskey, and I had to buy it myself. But yeah,
I thought you would have played Candy Crush to earn that. I mean, because
it'd probably take me a while to earn that.
Talking about the IPA, I was trying to think. There's a release. Is it not one of the Dram More bottles this time round? It's in a stout cask or a. Oh
no! Somebody done an Ardmore in a stout cask. Who was it?
Oh, it's Murray McDavid.
Yes,
actually, Murray McDavid. They've just released an Ardmore in a stout cask. Yeah, which looks really interesting.
Do you know what? I really wanted to buy it for our next Ardmore tasting, but it was like 90 quid odd.
Oh,
and I was just like, it's pricey.
It's only like a 9-year-old as well, isn't it? It's not like a...
Yeah, it's 9 or 10-year-old or something like that. But I'm guessing maybe the because of the cask, they probably paid a bit extra for that as well, you know. But and again, you know,
cask is a 9-year-old that you'd be better getting your hands on.
Well, it's one of those as well. It's like, this is kind of where it comes in the crux of things as well, as far as sort of, and probably because I'm in the position that I'm in, that, you know, if I wasn't doing a whiskey tasting every month or 2 whiskey tastings every month, I would probably be more selective with what I bought and what I spent my money on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But because I've got, you know, a lot of the time I could be buying anything. I mean, last month I think I bought 8 bottles of whiskey last month. You know, it was, you've got to be more selective about what you buy, and the price point does have to be an important part of that, you know, because at the end of the day as well, there's no point, you know, there's other guys out there that do tastings and they'll charge you I don't know, £100 for a tasting, you know. And sorry, it's my dogs going mental, squirrels.
I'm not paying £100 for a tasting. That's what your dog said.
Yeah. Well, it's like, is it the whiskey sponge guys, speciality drinks? I think they've done like a £100 tasting, you know, and their bottles are usually around about £100 each anyway, you know. So, I mean, you know, if you're a big fan of the whiskey sponge bottlings, then it's probably a good bang for your buck. But, you know, I mean,
it's never good. It's never good bang for your buck paying £20 for a nip.
Well, yeah, certainly not.
It depends, because I know, I don't know if Matthew Runcey's still on. He'll do the guys still kind of between. They were doing one with a rare whiskey tasting with Alistair, not Alistair, Angus McDowell.
All right, yeah.
And it was about £100 a nip, I think, and it was all his rare gas. And there's one got it failed, and they're opening some good drams. I think to make it valuable, you know, if you're going to crack open a £2 grand bottle of whiskey for people to taste, I think, you know, from a business point of view, you're going to have to charge that. Whether people are willing to pay it matter, you know.
Exactly. You know, and I think there probably is, but you've kind of got to market yourself in that area in the beginning. You know, it's like, I mean, if I was to turn around, I mean, obviously, you know, you guys know, it's like pretty much all of my tastings range from sort of £25 to £35, depending on, you know, what the bottles are and how many bottles we have. But, you know, if I was to turn around next month and put on a tasting for £100, even if it was a bunch of sort of old and rare whiskey, you know, the chances of me selling that out are slim to none. You know, it's just
it's not the kind of club either. We'd probably all buy it.
Watching, would you pay £100 for a Gary Dunsire tasting?
I wouldn't pay £100 for one of my tastings.
The only reason we pay it would be so we could come online and actually slag you off for selling a £100 ticket.
Well, I'll take a slagging for £100. Like, I mean, like, I'm quite happy with that.
Being in your position, what you do, not kind of, I don't know how you run it again. It's just you buy the bottles and then sell the tickets. But if you're looking at that, you would have to get the money up front from the guys. This is the idea.
Yeah.
This is what it's going to cost. Who's up for it? And then if it's viable, then you do it.
Yeah, because the last thing you want to be left with is like £3.5 grand's worth of whiskey, and you know, all the bottles are already opened because you sold 4 tickets. You know, so yeah, it is one of those. But again, you know, coming back to the whole sort of base of the Whiskey Club as well was the fact of that trying to show people that you don't have to spend a lot of money to have some really good whiskey. You know, bottles of whiskey in your cupboard, you know, and even nowadays, which is probably even more relevant than it was when I started 2-3 years ago, is the fact that because the prices are going up, you know, with everybody, you know, it's not just the indie bottlers that are paying more for the cash and everything. Everybody has jumped on it, you know, you know, all the distilleries are at it.
One whiskey drinkers involved now, and that annoys. It just annoys me. I don't drink this stuff. I'm just in it for the investment. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, really? But
you know, these guys
much as the drinkers do at the end of the day, and we just have to.
I kind of feel like sort of as sort of custodian of the club, if you like, you know, it's like that. It's my responsibility to kind of go and find the drams that are a good price, but that are still really good drams, you know, and that's kind of why I like doing sort of 1 or 2 of my own tastings, you know, just that I pick the bottles myself, is because you can kind of dig out some really good stuff, you know.
Yeah. Callum's got a great wee comment there.
Totally agree,
£30
Callum.
for the tasting and £70 for the after party comedy chat. It's worth it every penny.
It's looking for £70 just to watch me sleeping, Callum.
I'm down into golf tonight.
I know it's one of those we could probably do if I had any sort of computer skills at all or editing skills. It'd be great just to do like a a best of sort of like all the daft outtakes from our tastings, you know, is because it does get a bit off piste sometimes, but then that's the way I like it, you know. Is
Wallabies would have to feature there somewhere, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely, you know. But then it shows as well that people are actually relaxed and they're sort of enjoying it, you know, and they're quite comfortable and just talking nonsense to each other, you know. Is that to me is a sign of, I mean, I would expect that when I'm doing the tastings in the pub, you know, is that we just go off topic and we're talking about all sorts of things, you know, as much as it's based around the whiskey, but it should be based around, you know, having good times with people and enjoying yourself. You know, at the end of the day, that's what whiskey's about, you know, is sort of like having a good laugh and chat with your friends, you know, is nobody wants to sit and drink bottles and bottles. I mean, you know, you imagine some guy that's like collecting whiskey for 30, 40 years, you know, and very rarely goes out to the pub or anything like that, very rarely socialises with anybody, and just sitting there on 40 years worth of whiskey, you know, it's like, I mean, you know, it's just going to go to waste, you know, it's, well, until obviously they pass away and then they're, the next person gets a hold of it and then they're all right, they're in the money, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
They're in the money and they've got no idea. They just crack it open and scoof it. That's good.
Well, there is that as well, you know, but there is a lot of the time as well when people sort of say to me as well, and it's like, well, you know, if you've got so many bottles, it's like, you know, you've always got those people online, you know, as, oh, do you not open your bottles, or do you not, you know, well, have you got these bottles in a collection, you know, you don't drink them. And it's like, no, I just buy more than I can actually physically consume, you know.
That's
which is no bad thing, you know.
And we're all probably guilty. All of us are probably guilty of that. That's what we do, you know. But as you say, and it's, you know, I mean, I guess every customer's entitled to do what they want to do, but it doesn't feel great when somebody leaves the shop with something that you know is never going to be, certainly never going to be drunk by them. And depending on who actually comes across it, I mean, somebody might actually throw it away, you know.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they'll just pass it on to somebody else as a present because they don't really like whiskey, you know, and it was given to them as a present, and they're like, oh well, too nice.
That's okay. I like the fact that somebody's going to fall into a nice bottle. That's a good thing. But yeah,
we a friend who's a posting, known him for years, and around his house, I think it was Christmas, New Year kind of time. I finished work about around his house, and a couple of friends had cracked over the bottle. He gets whiskey every year. He hates whiskey, he doesn't drink it, but he collected this plethora of bottles and all that. So he's just like, help yourself a bottle, guys, and all. So I got in, and it was about that left of a 1994 Brora Gordon MacPhail.
Wow.
Was it 94? 84 maybe? 84 Brora Gordon MacPhail.
He must be a really good postie, like, eh?
Yeah. But it was like the old tube, the plastic kind of sleeve, you know, the cardboard sleeve with the plastic window. And it was like tattered and everything. So somebody'd obviously just, we'll get a bottle, no idea, giving it to him. So I goes, oh, bloody hell. It was after that. I finished the bottle, and it was literally the last dram because I got there late. And I was like, by the way, Brian, that's a great dram. Do you know how much the bottle was worth? He's like, no idea. So I told him, he's like, and you finished the bottle, and I got the brunt of it. I was like, whoa. That bottle was long gone before I got involved. So yeah. But what an occasion just to walk in and see that and think, Christ, I'm never going to get that opportunity again. And if I was 13, I'd be like, don't open that bottle, Brian. Do you know how much that's worth? So it's nice to have that off my conscience where I can say, well, yeah.
I think that's part of it. You touched on it there as well. I never really thought about so much, but another reason I think that I don't have that sort of like burning desire to try and run out and taste everything, you know, is because you know, I've got a few pals as well, and they'll go on tastings, you know, and it'll be slightly more expensive, but they'll have like 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and things, and they're like, oh well, I just want to try it, you know, because I'm never going to be able to afford a bottle. And I completely get that, you know, but then it's probably just the tight arse in me is like, well, I could buy like 2 bottles for that, you know.
I'm exactly the same. But I don't think I think I'm the same as you. I've got no desire to taste absolutely everything. I love, stumbling across a bottle for a reasonable price, and I say reasonable for me in the 50s. Round about
Yeah.
just below or round about the 50s. But finding a bottle that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Something that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the same with drams, It's like, I mean, there's nothing better than stumbling into a pub in the Highlands or something like that and coming across like an old, I don't know, something like old Ben Romick in a crazy wine cask or something like that, and paying like £4.60 for it, and you walk out the bar with a wee skip in your step, going, woohoo!
Stephen, having half emptied the bottle, yeah.
Well, even sort of like, so we were over in Campbelltown at the start of the year, the end of April there, and even in the Ardshiel Hotel, I still managed to find 2 or 3 absolute bargains on their list, So again, it's just that kind of thinking out the box and not just. I mean, the way I do it is I just look down the price list at the actual prices first, and then look over to see what the actual dram is, rather than doing it the other way around.
That's a very good unit, isn't it? Yeah.
That's how you find a bargain, is, and you go, oh, hang on a minute, that's not a bad price. I'll start with one of them,
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of those, and again, even with the auction side of things as well, it's kind of thinking outside the box, so looking for some of those lesser known auctions that have not got a huge audience, and that's where you'll pick up some good bargains, because nobody else is looking at them, or even the people that are on those auctions, they're all looking for Springbanks and they're all looking for Macallans, they're not
unicorn bottles, yeah, absolutely.
So it's the same thing with auctions. I start at the very bottom of the auction, at the cheapest bottles first, and work my way backwards.
Mm-hmm. What stage do you start looking at the auction? Because now with this sniper software, you could be thinking you're in a bargain right up until it's closed, and then all of a sudden it jumps up to £200. It's like,
yeah, well, I've always kind of had a thing with that as well. Is so I never put a bid in at all until the last day, basically. But I'll put all of these things onto my watch list, and then I'll maybe check it sort of maybe the day before the auction, and then I'll go through and all the ones that I've kind of earmarked. If they've went over what I'm willing to pay, then I'll take them out of the watch list, and then it just leaves kind of the things that I'm willing to pay. But I've always been quite good with that, with sort of like setting myself a price limit on things. We've all made the mistake of sort of like putting bids in for like 4 or 5 different things and thinking, no, you're going to get outbid on them, and then suddenly you find that you won them all, and it's
it's all the same bottle as well. Yeah.
But yeah, that lesson was learned pretty quickly. It was after that I was a bit more canny with my bids, But like I say, I mean, things like sort of old blends and sort of like lesser known distilleries, lesser known indie bottlers. Still plenty of stuff out there to find, It's you just got to know where to look. That's all.
Yeah, and I suppose discipline is the part as well. Is it have a limit, because you can get people who are chasing it. It's almost like gambling, isn't it? That the auction mentality is that I'm not going to let that person from the other side of the world beat me to this by £10, and you get in a and it's
definitely.
You have
and especially the way that the auctions are now kind of designed as well, where it's it runs on sort of every 5 or 10 minutes after somebody else makes a bid, so they're almost encouraging you to keep bidding.
I'm amazed. One, because of the licensing laws of Scotland, legally we're not like change your price of a drink.
Yeah.
As a retailer or as a pub, a hotel, whatever, you're not allowed to change the price of a drink for less than 72 hours. I don't know how. It's obviously different rules for auctioneers or whatever, but and two, the whole it can be an addiction. The gamble awareness must be. So why are they not saying?
I think the pub thing was because of the whole sort of like happy hours, but then it was like a happy hour that was lasting like you know, for like a day or something like that, or 2 days or a week or something like that, you know, and then it was just getting out of hand.
Fair will be have a happy weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was. But I suppose, like, well, I mean, I would guess with most of the bars and things like that, especially nowadays, it's probably not so much of an issue because, you know, even the pub prices these days are kind of went through the roof, and also as well, people's drinking habits have changed. You know, it's like, you know, people. I think nowadays, people are more conscious of what they're drinking. They're more willing to pay a little bit more for a quality drink, but then drink less of it. You know, unless you're me, and then you just buy quality drink and then drink more of it. It just costs you more.
Well,
the good trend is between 18 and 24-year-olds are spending more than they've ever spent before on alcohol, but they're drinking less than they've ever drunk. So
that's interesting.
The kind of craft generation, I don't know what the brew or whatever they're called.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a generation thing as well, you know. So I've got a younger sister who's 15 years younger than me, so I'm coming up 40 this year. My sister's now 25, and she's just like not a big drinker at all, never has been. Even when she was a teenager, you know, it was like, I think, you know, when I was sort of like 16, 17, you know, until I was old enough to get the booze, you know, you were always out sort of like hanging about, and you were, you know, you would find somebody to get your booze from somewhere, and you would end up like absolute hanging drunk, you know, by the end of the night, staggering in. But the kids just didn't do that by the time that, you know, they were my little sisters. I'm sure there's still kids out there that do that, but, you know, I think there is like definitely a sort of health conscious shift change there, where they've probably seen, you know, their parents in the generation before getting in all sorts of knots and went like, yeah, I'm not gonna fall in that trap, you know.
I think I did that with my wife, with Tori, rather than my little sister, but she's not a big drinker anymore. She blames me for it, so I guess.
But yeah, I think there is definitely a generation thing there as well. You know, if you look at sort of like the drinking habits of sort of, certainly when I grew up in the 80s, you know, and even in the 90s, you know, it was very much cheap booze, pour it down your throat.
Yeah.
You know, get as drunk as you like.
It's really important or nowadays, social culture and all that as well. Your Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is, you have to be healthy, you have to be fit, you have to look good, you have to be kind of go to the gym and all that has had an effect on the younger generation as well.
Yeah, it's all about looking after yourself.
Yeah,
imagine.
I mean, imagine.
I know. Meanwhile, our generation are trying to destroy ourselves. You know.
What happened to trying to wreck your life? I mean, Jesus.
I know. Aye. Where's the fun in trying to be healthy? You know.
Image, and I think that translates as well when they're sitting in the bar. The image of sitting drinking something like the local craft brewer over a pint of 10 it's much more fast. It's a status thing, is it? People don't want to be seen to be drinking Skol Lager anymore.
Or a Bacardi and Coke.
I'm just looking at the time before I actually think about the watershed for what we're actually going to describe these people. But I think it seems that we're breeding a bunch of wankers, to be quite honest.
Are we? We are. We've been.
No, the new generation.
All right.
Well, it's it's very much. I'm sure, like, you know, in another generation or two's time, you know, then they'll look back at us like a bunch of dinosaurs. With like we smoked, we drank, you know. They were like, why were people just like willingly poisoning themselves? You know, it was like, I mean, you know, folk will think that's absolutely nuts. You know, but yeah, I mean, it's.
For 20 grand.
Well, the thing is as well, is like, I mean, I've always said as well, is like, I absolutely love the smell and the taste of whiskey. It's just unfortunate that the byproduct is that it knocks you on your arse. You know, I mean, you know, if I could smell and taste more whiskey without getting as drunk than I would, you know. But there has to be a limit, and I think that comes with age as well. Is that you learn your limits, you know, probably after pushing the boundaries.
It changes. I was having this conversation with Rachel the other day because we were talking about when you used to go to your bed blind drunk and the room would be spinning. You couldn't close your eyes because you'd be literally thinking you're going to fall off your bed. I don't get that anymore because I mean, as people will know who've been on especially those that were on that fateful night with Kenny on the Dramore night. No, in fact, it was the Ardmore night. It was the Ardmore night.
That's right. Yeah.
I just crash out now. So I literally don't get so drunk that I get that spinning thing because I fall asleep before that actually happens. I get to the drunk stage where I just crash out.
Yeah.
But I don't have the spinning head anymore. So
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things as well. Was even sort of
sleepy not dizzy, Dave. Yeah.
I spend a lot of time in pubs, as you probably well know. It's my favorite pastime. You know, but you know, it's one of those things as well. Is that I'll be sitting there and I'll be chatting away to people and I'll be having a great time and I'll be having whiskies, but I will know, and you know, something will go off sort of where I know at that point is like, right, I need to get up the road, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not at the point where like now I'm going to fall over. It's that sort of like half an hour before that point that I go, right, I know that it's in the post. Now's the time to call it a day. You know, and I'll just bow out.
I find myself at that stage now as well. From out, I'm just like, you know, and the friends are gonna, we'll go to a house party or whatever. And I'm just like, and there's this big kind of part of me thinks, yeah, let's go, but there's a niggling home and beacon saying, don't be stupid, Mike, go home. It's almost an internal battle, but more often than not nowadays, I'm just
it's the angel and the devil. It's on their shoulders. Yeah.
And I think that again, that's sort of another thing where it kind of comes with age as well, is the fact of, you know, I had more than my fair share of house parties, usually in my house as well, and it was that way where you were kind of spurred on to keep going and keep drinking because, you know, you were the one having the party and you didn't want to kick everybody out and whatever else, you know, whereas now it's, you know, I don't have any of those sort of hang-ups now that I'm older, and I'm just like, no, you know, I'm not staying for another drink, and they'll be, oh, you know, just another one, I'll get you another one, and you're like, nah, do you know what, don't bother me.
You'll have two.
You know, it's like I'm not.
What was the advert?
Not so easy swayed.
Was it Tune the Fat? Was it go take a drink? Go on. And it was, you'll take a drink. No, I'm off it. I'll take a drink. Okay, go on then.
It's so true. You know, it's so true. It's like that way where, you know.
Yeah,
that's why.
Tune the Fat kind of.
Danny Boy does a couple of good ones as well with drink, and that's the one you'll have two. Where it was used to be closing time, the bell would go and everybody would go, "Oh, what are you doing, bringing that bloody bell for Christ's sake? You know, stop it! Don't ring the bell." And then it was like, "You'll have two, right? So two, you'll have two, you'll have two." And there's always somebody says, "No, I'll just have one. I'm driving. I'm working tomorrow." You'll have two.
Yeah, well, again. It's the same thing as like growing up in that sort of small village mentality, you know, was that very much was the case. You know, in the 1980s, it was basically like the bell rang and everybody would like bolt to the bar, you know, fill the trays with as much stuff as possible, and then it would be like another hour and a half before you would get kicked out because everybody had so many drinks. You know?
that was kind of our FOMO, wasn't it? Whereas you the fear of missing out the after party, the fear of missing out the shenanigans, and in the morning you probably missed out anyway because you were that blazing you couldn't remember what happened. But that was kind of what our FOMO was. FOMO now is buying a bottle of Springbank or Daft Miller.
Yeah, that's it. You know, like I say, is that, you know, the whole chasing bottles thing. I mean, I think you know, we're all guilty of it to an extent. You know, there's always something that comes out, and especially now because they're so prevalent, the bottles coming out. I mean, like it's every single week now, you know, and especially if you are a big whiskey fanatic, you know, then you are always looking for the next bottle, whether that be something that's been out for ages and then they just give you like a £25 off in a sale or something. You think, I mean, I was looking at, I can't remember where it was, but they had Douglas Lang, was it a Timorous Beastie 18, I think it was.
Okay, yeah.
And it was like 25 quid off. It was like about 56 quid or something like that, you know. It was like, for an 18-year-old, okay, it's a blended malt, but I mean, I thought that's an absolute cracking price, you know. It was,
yeah.
and those are the
Yeah.
kind of things that you would pull the trigger on if you've got enough money in the bank. You just go, I'll just take one of them just now, you know.
Yeah. We have found that these kind of releases are slowly, but the last two Iron Americans haven't flown. Obviously, the Paul Linus disappeared quicker than anything.
Yeah, I never got one of those either.
Distillery, it hasn't quite caught the inspiration, and you know, there's a few of them now that we're sitting on that we thought, you know, this time last year that would have been long gone.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's only a good thing, you know, is because again, you know, like you say, I mean, Ardnamurchan, I think as far as the new distilleries go, I think they're probably one of the top ones, I would say, as far as the quality of the spirit that's coming out. And also as well the fact that they've managed to kind of walk that tightrope of pricing it right, but not overly pricing all of it, you know. So the standard release and even the cask strength that came out, that was another one we put in the tasting just last Sunday, was the cask strength, and it was cracking, you know. Everybody thought it was a fantastic whiskey, but still 65 quid a bottle for a cask strength. I think that's reasonable in today's market. Nickneen, I think, are another one that, you know, I've been pretty impressed with. Okay, their last couple of bottles were what, 85 quid, I think it was, for the
85, yeah.
It was a wee bit steep.
And again,
but
you
the
know,
whiskey's
you
good.
get it back for money though. That these guys are throwing this whiskey out at 4 or 5 years old for anywhere between.
The other one as well is, like, especially with Nickneen and Ardnamurchan, for that fact, is logistic wise, it must be an absolute pain in the ass, you know, for them to get materials in and out. You know, it's like, I mean, it's possibly one of the most remote places on the mainland of Scotland. You know, it's like, it's an absolute nightmare.
Have you been to Nickneen?
No, not yet. Not yet. I'm going to try and do the two at the same time, I think, is the best way to do it.
Make sure you've got a loan out so you can get plenty of petrol in your car. It's such a long drive, and that's the only. I mean, I guess when I went there, I didn't think about it, but I would like to ask them the question about that, because you're right about the logistics of getting things in and out. It's or they're actually putting carbon back, so they're not zero carbon, they're plus or negative.
Carbon negative.
Yeah. But yeah, there must be big lorries going along that road. That can't be, and it's not a great road. It's really not a good road at all. I've heard that. I wouldn't have wanted to meet a big articulated lorry on that road at all.
Yeah, it's you know, and I suppose on one side of the coin is that's part of the admire of the distillery, I suppose, you know, is the fact of it.
It's a beautiful spot. You're looking across the sea, straight across the Tobermory. You know, you can see the colourful houses of the town.
Really? Is it that close?
Yeah, it's just literally just right across the water.
Wow!
So you can see the harbour and the houses. Yeah,
that's very cool.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful place. But I did wonder about, you know, for such the environmentally friendly distillery, how you get stuff in and out. It's got to be big articulated lorries, and it's not a road built for it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, even their casks and everything else, you know, I mean, they've got to get the casks in and out. I mean, the barley, I think, is coming from Fife, I think, possibly, or even if it's Inverness, you know, it's like, I mean, it's still a trek, you know, and it's still, like you say, it's that road as well, you know, is not the easiest to get along. But so yeah, I mean, I kind of get where their price point is going, and again, if you look at, I suppose, some of the single cask Ardnamurchan stuff, they're kind of on point, you know. Is but again, I like the spirit quality is the bottom line. I think Nickneen's spirit is really, really good. and I've said that since, you know, the first bottle that I tried, which I think was batch 1, and I was like, nah, they've hit the nail on the head. You know, is if it's that young and it's tasting that good, then it can only mean good things in the future. You know,
it's a nice easy dram. I think they were bottling it at 46% as well. I think, which
yeah, I think it's 40. I've got the what was the other one? The
newer one,
Quiet Rebels.
Huntress.
No, the Quiet Rebels. It was finished in a Tokai wine cask.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was 48.5%. But yeah, again, perfect for this time of year. You know, it's nice summertime dram.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly is, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, you're looking at Ardnamurchan, nickname. My two probably standouts at the moment are Ardnamurchan and Ramsey. I think they've
Rassie's another one.
But there's certainly a new distillery for everyone at the moment. It's not just a whiskey for everyone. There's a new distillery for everyone as well.
I mean, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the others aren't good. You know, I think King's Barnes, I think, will do great in maybe another 3 or 4 years. I think that one's going to need a bit more time in the barrel. I think, for instance, Lindors are doing great stuff.
Yeah.
Love the people at Lindors. I think they're doing all the right things with regards to the spirit, but also, you know, they're building the business in the right direction as well. Yeah, I mean, then obviously there's Francis with Daft Mill, which, you know, is obviously, he's got his own story going on, you know, but I kind of love that as well, is the fact of, like, I remember actually getting a tour around Daft Mill Distillery eventually after years of pestering him. I was sending him emails all the time, you know, and I was just like, oh, because I knew the spirit had been sitting there for donkeys, you know, and I kept pinging him emails, and he was just like, he sent me the same thing all the time. It'll be ready when it's ready, you know, and it was just like waiting. Eventually, once I'd moved to Edinburgh, and I was working in the whiskey bar, and me and a pal of mine that worked there, we asked him if we could go down for a visit, and he says, just come down, I'll give you a show around, you know. So we turned up in the farm, and he rocked up in his tractor, typical farmer style, with his boiler suit on, you know, and he's like, go on, I'll give you a wander around. So he took us round the distillery, and then we finished in the warehouses at the other side. He's just using like wheelie bins for his grain bins, you know. It's like and then we got to the warehouse on the other side, and he says, you'll be wanting a dram then. And I says, well, if you wouldn't mind, you know. So he's like, there should be a couple of glasses over there. Just like these two like absolute manky whiskey glasses, man, you know. And he's just like that, rubbing them on his boiler suit. That'll do you, like it.
A wee bit of farmyard funk in there, eh?
That's kind of that's the distillery tours that you'll never forget, man. You know.
Absolutely.
But you go like that to somewhere like, I don't know, Glenfiddich or Macallan or Glen Grant, and everything's polished to within an inch of his life.
Yeah, or even sort of what was the other one, Glen Turret, you know, with the grouse experience before it was sort of changed hands as well. It was more sort of like a museum-y sort of thing, you know. But then you know, they've all got their thing, and I mean, it is a slight worry that all the distilleries will fall down that route, because you know there's nothing better than there's nothing better than going into some distilleries, and it's kind of, even if it is some of the bigger ones, you know, Springbank I think still do a fantastic tour, you know, and it's, you actually get to speak to some of the guys that work there as well, you know, which is an added sort of bonus. Whereas, you know, nowadays, with more so, I would say, with the newer distilleries, I suppose, as well, is they've got to kind of work harder to make you spend that money in the gift shop on the other side of the tour, you know. It's that it can be a bit more, I don't know, a bit more sort of up to date and a bit more you know, again, I come back to the same thing. At the end of the day, it is a business, you know, and it's about how many people can you get through a tour and out the door and get the next group in. You know, is for some of these distilleries, that's the aim of the game.
Yeah, that's the direction that we've gone in. That's the big money maker. That's the tourist part of it. But I mean, ultimately, these are factories, you know. Ultimately, but it's become this kind of tourist thing, which is fantastic. But I'd much rather have that experience that the farmer wipes the glass in his biley and you've got the kind of wipe a wee bit of dung off it before you can than the kind of polished kind of scripted tour that you get with the tartan.
You know? Yeah, the other side of it as well is, you know, is at the end of the day, you know, the distilleries and their tours, for that fact, should be about creating a memorable experience.
Oh God, absolutely, yeah.
You know, and some people probably will say that virtual tour was a memorable experience, you know, but it's, like you say, it's never going to be the same as sort of when you get that taken into a warehouse somewhere and going like, oh, do you know what? There's only 3 years in the tour. Do you want to go and taste something really good? You know, you know, and then you get that cast sample of something, you know, really special, and you just go, oh God, you know, I'll never forget this as long as I live, sort of thing. You know, those are the moments that you kind of crave after, isn't it? You know, as a whiskey enthusiast, then those are the kind of, you know, or sitting on the beach at somewhere in Bowmore or you know, Bruichladdich at Port Charlotte, something like that. You know, sitting there with a dram in your hand, watching the sun go down. You know, eating fresh oysters or something like that. You know, it's like, or even a pizza or something like that. You know, but just, you know, those are the kind of the things that make
that, you know, no matter what whiskey is, you're having a great experience. You'll remember that experience as being fantastic, and the whiskey might not have been that great, but because it was the one you were drinking, you'll always have an affinity to it, and you always think, oh, I remember when we were on the beach at Bruichladdich, kind of overlooking the bay, and we had all of, I don't know, Bowmore, looking over at Bowmore. You might not like Bowmore, but in that moment, it's like
the best whiskey you've ever tasted.
Yeah. And you will always, that will continue. So anytime you see a Bowmore, you remember that and you think, I'll have a Bowmore, and it's outstanding. You know, but you probably don't like it, experience overriding that. You're like, because you then tell your time.
It's exactly the same for me with Ardbeg, and I'm by no means a massive Ardbeg fan. You know, it's like, I mean, I do like Ardbegs, but I think again they're another one where the qualities maybe went down slightly in recent years. But I mean, it's like memories of Ardbeg for me are, I think I went to the Facial the year that the Ardbog came out.
Okay.
I mean, that was probably like 2017 maybe. I don't know, but it was a few years back now anyway. But there was a guy and he was doing Arbroath Smokies, but he was smoking them with Ardbeg barrels.
Yeah.
And it was later in the afternoon. The sun was splitting the sky. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the festival was going on around Ardbeg. And I got round to this stall, and the guy had the Arbroath Smokies, and he literally had 2 scrawny kippers left hanging on a piece of string. That was it. And so I went over to the guy and I says, oh, is there any chance of smoking? He says, mate, he's like, that is it. He's like, I've not even got any paper plates left. He's like, I've got nothing. And he was like, just take them. He's like, just have them. He says, there's a napkin. So that was it. I had this huge glassy Ardbog and 2 Smokies sitting on the pier, like with my legs hanging off the pier at Ardbeg, sun in the sky, and I was just like, God, this is the best day of my life. You know, it's like, I mean, you could not get a better day. You know, there was like a woman going around, she had like one of these big 4.5 litre more bottles. She was just pouring everybody drams out of this 4.5 litre bottle. You know, those are the kind of memories that you just, you know, you'll never forget as long as you live. You know, and that's what it should be about. You know, is even the face, I worry sometimes is getting a bit Disneyland-esque, you know, and not just the Disneyland side, but the queuing outside the distilleries for the special releases, the the auction guys rocking up and basically picking up bottles before they've even touched the ground. You know, it's like it's all just become a bit sad. You know, but yeah, I mean, again,
I hope that's going to change a wee bit. I think that's the hope. I mean, it's a big enough industry where we can maybe just turn away from some of these things for a wee while and go back to them once they've kind of calmed down a little bit. And you know, there's other places we can kind of go and other drams we can enjoy. Once these kind of, as you say, the auction guys, once they maybe slope off.
Yeah, and I think it will. I think it will tail off in the end. You know, but it's probably going to be a few years before the people that are not whiskey heads lose interest. You know, and with that, we'll probably have a lot more people interested in whiskey along the way. But that's no bad thing as long as they're interested in it. You know, it's just trying to shake off the folk that are trying to make a quick buck. That's the tricky bit.
Yeah, I think that when the next fad comes along, whether it's NFTs or trainers or something, then the guys who are only in it for the money will latch on to whatever's next. Hope so, yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those, you know, is when you know, going back to things like Macallan, you know, they're the people that are kind of perpetuating that at the same time. You know, as long as there's rare and expensive Macallans and things like that coming out, then you know there's going to be people with a big wallet there ready to capitalise on it. You know, but yeah, you know, like I always say, there always will be good whiskey out there. You know, and hopefully it will always be at a reasonable price. You know,
exactly.
It's just that we might just have to look a wee bit further afield for it. You know.
It is. It's tough, you know, and where we are as a shop as well. We're not a tourist location. We're very much supported by the local guys, and a lot of these guys are also kind of start, or they're coming in. They're buying for friends. They're buying for family, birthday presents, this kind of thing, and it's like so our struggle during lockdown was for us. Promoting indie bottlers was great because we knew that that's what people were looking for. People coming into the shop, kind of from Inverurie, somebody else, they're not very familiar. So if we say, if they come in looking for a Glenallachie, we're like, oh, well, we've got this great Murray McDavid Glenallachie, something a little bit different, single cask, quite rare. Well, no, actually, he likes the 12-year-old. I just want to buy the 12. Okay, well, that's fair. But it's getting over that hurdle of getting them in and saying,
just going a wee bit more experimental.
Yeah, but we do. We've got a nice little group of guys who come in and say, actually, what's new, what's different? I like this. I love what you recommended me last time. Give me something similar. I'm
finishing off tonight with
Aberfeldy 18.
Yeah, so this one,
the tasting that we had.
With Matt, yeah.
The Côte de Rôti cask, yeah, it's a nice summertime dram as well. Again, another one of those distilleries, you know, churn out tons and tons. Most it goes into dewars, but you know, they still make a damn good whiskey. And Stephanie McLeod, I think, has won Master Blender 3 years on the bounce, you know, so they must be doing something right, you know.
It's Aberfeldy. It was when I did my first ever whiskey course. Aberfeldy was the dram that they had as the classic Highland whiskey. I don't think it's a classic Highland, but it's really resonated with that fruitiness, that real pear drop. It was a 12-year-old.
Yeah, 12's fantastic. You know, it's like it's a cracking dram. You know, and okay, it's maybe only a 40%, but you know, when you put it up against things like sort of, I don't know, Balvenie Doublewood or, you know, your kind of staples that you would expect, you know, a Singleton 12 or something like that, you know, it holds its own, you know, it's
like Grant in that kind of fruity spirit number, that pear drops, sweet candy kind of thing.
Yeah. But no, it's a nice easy sipper again for a nice summer evening, you know, it hits the spot perfect, you know, And it is only Thursday after all, so I am still taking it easy.
Leave the car strength for Saturday.
Exactly, yeah. But listen, I'm going to have to sign off as well, guys, as my battery's just about to die, I think, as well. But yeah, always great to chat.
Pleasure to have you on, Gary. Thank you very much for that. It's
fantastic to have you on. Yeah, it's in about time too. So So what's the next one you're saying is Dramore, and is that next Thursday?
Dramore's next Thursday, and then I've got a single cask Apmore tasting that'll be coming up in August.
That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, so we've got
guys, anybody out there who's never done an East City Whisky Club tasting, guys, get on to Facebook. You're on Facebook. Like the page.
The tasting will be up on Facebook probably next week. But yeah, either that, ping us a little email as well. Is just info@, eastcitywhiskyclub.com, at google.com, sorry. But yeah, you can ping me a message on Facebook or Messenger or anything if you're interested in tastings. I'm always happy to drink whiskey.
Absolutely. So yeah, oh, Dave, yeah, absolutely, Dave. You should join in. If you've never been to one of the tastings, you should definitely join in. But you've got to be prepared to have rhinoceros type skin.
Not at all. We're gentle pussycats.
Easily one of the best nights you'll ever have, guys. So yeah, definitely tune in sometime. But Gary, thanks again. Absolutely brilliant to have you on.
Much obliged, gents. Have a good night.
Speak lots more. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll get you on a tasting soon, guys.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Cheers, mate. Yeah.
Take care. Bye. Was my internet going in and out quite often there then?
Still on live, mate.
Oh. Bye, guys.
See that? Oh, you're not off yet, are you?